Ruchika Singh and I teach history in Indraprasth College for Women. My area of specialization is modern Indian history, and it gives me immense pleasure and opportunity to discuss with you the agrarian changes in the colonial India. In order to understand this theme, we would be more focusing on land revenue system in British India. Now, before we are going to even talk about land revenue system in British India, I want you all to really think about in terms of the historical background within which this theme has otherwise, you can say, come into existence. So the moment we are even talking about the historical background, it would be more wiser to start with the etymological meaning of land revenue. So the moment we are going to talk about the etymological meaning of the land revenue system, I want you all to really think about this prominent question that is going to come up, is that what you really think about land revenue. So the moment we are going to say and we are going to define it in the derivative terms, we can say that land revenue is tax or revenue that is levied on agriculture production on land which is either collected as a percentage of the share of the total crop or monetary value is fixed on the land which is to be paid by the farmer. So in short, if we really have to understand, we can say that land revenue is a kind of, you can say, tax that is basically, you can say, fixed up there on the agriculture production, and a part of it is taken as a share, or you can say is fixed on that basis. You can say the farmer is expected to pay. Now once we have actually said that, again we are moving back to where we have actually begun it, that if we really have to understand this entire theme, won't it be more wiser to really get into the conditions and the circumstances within which this theme actually came up? So in order to understand that, we can simply say that agrarian sector was the primary sector on which you can say the major economic activities used to be taken, and it was like something that was done for centuries and centuries. Now in order to understand that, we have to understand it from the perception this entire, you can say, system was actually put into force. So if we really have to understand that, we would be trying to understand it from the perception, or you can say the percept of the kings and the rulers. Now the moment we are going to talk about the kings and the rulers, we can simply say that they were the ones who have always tried to gain a large part of their revenue from taxes on agriculture. And we all know that it was the major aim of the British, you can say, government to earn maximum profit from India. That was also imposed, you can say, heavy taxes on agriculture. Now the moment we are even talking about it, it would be more, you can say in a way more accessible, it would be more wiser again to understand how this entire process was laid down. Now the moment we are even talking about, we are basically trying to assess how this system was actually put into force, and there we are going to even talk about that the Britishers tried really hard to, you can say, assess and collect these taxes from various land revenue settlements that they introduced. Now if we really have to understand how this entire, you can say, procedure was put into, you can say, planning, and it was executed by, we have to first of all really imagine how the British East India Company, you can say, has just defeated, you can say, some Indian rulers to begin with and annexed their territories. Now when they did it, the major question that was in front of them was now what they are going to do in. Now we all know that that was the reason why they wanted taxes to be collected from these lands. Now one perception could be that it could have been done by looting and plundering. But for how long the looting and plundering is going to go on? And even if it's going to be executed up, will it serve their purpose? So we all know that even if they are going to do that and they're going to talk about, it's not going to help, you can say, the state anyway, anyhow, because whatever they are going to, you can say, do as part of the loot and plundering, they are not going to, you can say, in a way, they are not going to help the government treasury. So obviously, the other choice would be to, you can say, think about something that is going to be organized on the regular pattern. Now, when we were just talking about, you can say, the perception within which it could have been worked by, we can see that looting and plundering is not going to help them, because obviously it's going to make people really flee from their areas. So in order to, you can say, safeguard themselves, and the moment they're going to feel that their safety is going to be compromised upon, why they are going to even encourage themselves, you can say, staying in that particular, you can say, area to begin with. So obviously this perception is not going to help them. So obviously they have to think about something else that is going to help them. Now that was the reason why they thought about that it would be certainly a pragmatic decision if they are going to organize a regular system of taxation which is going to meet their requirements. That is, the government has to fix what or how much will be paid, and this entire, you can say, process was part of the assessment. And they have to ensure that who is going to pay that tax also. So in short, one can say that the first, you can say, option was something that they would not actually encourage there in the longer run, but then if they really have to think about in the longer, you can say, context, then this was one thing that is going to help them. Now the other set of like things that are going to come up as a part of, you can say, the procedural plan would be the person who is going to be selected to pay taxes must have some connection or control over the land from which the tax is to be collected, because he will otherwise be incapable of paying anything from it. So one can say and one can see that basically they understood at least this part, that they have to ensure that whosoever is going to be selected to pay the taxes need to have some sort of, you can say, connection or some sort of, you can say, relevance, or do have some sort of, you can say, control over that land, because after all it was the concern of the tax, and in order to ensure that that comfort level was required. Now when the government, you can say, places the burden of payment on a person, it must also check that he has some control over the land, so that he gets an income from which the tax can be paid. So that comfort level is going to give them some sort of, you can say, solace that this is the way they are going to pay the taxes, and in turn state is going to be also ensured up that this is the way the things are going to be otherwise carried on. Now the question that really comes up over here is, if he does not get anything from the land, he can obviously not pay anything to the government. Now when the government has fixed how the land tax was to be assessed and who was to pay it and what was to be paid, so in short one can say that if the person who is going to pay the tax is not going to get anything from that, then why that person, or you can say sort of like group of the people, would even like to be part of this entire task? So obviously as a part of, you can say, functionality, they also want something to be given. And it also speaks up that if he is not able to, you can say, get anything from the land, then obviously he is not in a position to pay anything to the government also as a part of the return. Now in order to ensure and to fix up this problem, the British government thought about they are going to fix the land revenue, and that is going to be part of their assessment, and it's going to be assessed, and there are two concerns that they would be addressing by. First, they are going to ensure who is going to pay it and how much need to be paid for that. Now, after having a brief, you can say, overview of the historical background within which this theme actually developed, or you can say Britishers came out with the changes there in the agrarian structure, um, it would be more functional if we can actually trace up with a specific, you can say, the timeline that could be used to understand, or for that matter we can say that there are certain episodes that we are going to bring in, we would be discussing them because they are going to help us understand better the circumstances and the condition within which this entire system actually came into existence. So, keeping in mind those questions and queries, though they are too inferential to begin with, but as it goes by, we cannot move ahead without answering the inferential questions. So, keeping in mind those inferential queries, we are going to start with certain, you can say, episodic, you can say, events that are going to strengthen our understanding about the theme. So, in that pretext, we are going to start with 1773. Now, this was an important year because East India Company decided to manage the land revenue directly, and in that very process, Warren Hastings auctioned the right to collect revenue to the highest bidders, but his ideas did not succeed in the long run. So we can see that 1773 was an important year because East India Company as a trading company decided that now they are going to directly, you can say, deal with the, you can say, the land revenues. They are going to take the authority in their hand and they are going to, you can say, move forward with that. And as it's always been said, the moment we are even talking about, you can say, land revenue systems, it has been always said as a part of the narrative that the individual, you can say, administrators played a very important role because they were the ones who shaped the entire, you can say, policy. So the policy, the system, the program that they came up was somehow the manifestation, affirmation, and you can say the understanding of the, you can say, individual administrators. And in that, Warren Hastings do have a very important, you can say, place to begin with. Now, the moment we are even talking about Warren Hastings, it's been, you can say, as a part of the discussion, we can see that he auctioned the right to collect revenue to the highest bidder. Now, auctioning was one, you can say, way they are going to deal with most of the challenges, because obviously in the process of auctioning, everybody is not going to participate. And obviously everybody is not going to be the highest bidder as well. So obviously the one who is like in a more, you can say, subtle position, who do have, you can say, access to the resources, can only be the person who could be actually seen as the highest bidder. But this entire, you can say, understanding with which Warren Hastings came up did not actually succeed there in the long run. And we all know there were several, you can say, variables that played an important role in not letting these, you can say, system to be in the existence as they really thought about. Now, with that comes a more, you can say, perceptional, you can say, understanding that although the amount of land revenue was raised high by Jamidars, the actual collection varied from year to year and rarely met the official expectations. This introduced instability in the company's revenue at a time when the company was hard pressed for money. So we can see that the amount of land revenue that was, you can say, fixed up with the Jamidars was too high to be paid by them. And I mean, that was one challenge, that it was too much to be asked for. And whether we are seeing it from the, you can say, lenses of the jamidars or the cultivators, the tax was too high to be paid. Then the next challenge that was coming up was the actual collection also varied from year to year. So it was really difficult to make out, uh, I mean, how much are they otherwise required to pay. And if it's going to vary from year to year, then the certainty is like something that is going to be a major concern. And if it's going to vary, obviously it's not going to meet the, you can say, the official expectations as well, because they are going to expect that every year, probably in a year, so they are going to think about this is like what they are capable of paying. But then the reality is like absolutely different in that regard. Then obviously year by year, until and unless it's not going to be stabilized, it's going to be a major challenge, and it's going to create much of the havocs rather than solving the problems. Now, obviously, if it's going to vary, then obviously it's going to bring, you can say, a lot of instability also there in the company's revenue, and it's going to vary from time to time. And we all know that this situation was like very hard pressing there on the company, because they have to ensure that there is a continuous flow of the revenue. Now, that was the concern with which they have to really settle down with, and they have to address this in some way or the other. Along with that, it was also came as a part of, you can say, the observation that neither the peasant nor the jamidars would do anything to improve cultivation when they did not know what the next year's assessment would be, or who would be appointed as the next year's revenue collector. At this stage, the idea first emerged of fixing the land revenue at a permanent amount. So we can see that the very first problem that they apprised up, that it's going to vary from, you can say, year to year, was itself so challenging. And to come up with the next, you can say, set of like problem, or you can say challenge, that neither the peasant nor the jamidar, you can say, neither the, you can say, the revenue collector nor the cultivator um, can actually do to improve the cultivation when they really don't know what is going to be the next year's assessment. And it also speaks about the interest of the, you can say, the collectors also, that would they be appointed next year as the revenue collector or not. So there was too much at stake that one has to really answer, one has to really, you can say, keep in mind. And that also created, you can say, a sort of, you can say, problem that they really have to address. Now, while, you can say, looking at these challenges, we can see that they understood very well that they have to really deal with this challenge, they have to really muster up this task, and it would be only possible if they are able to fix the land revenue, and that to be on a permanent, you can say, amount. It means it's not going to vary as it has been otherwise thought about. So it speaks a lot about how the things have been otherwise, you can say, conveyed across. Now, moving to that, there is like one more thing that we would be otherwise, you can say, interested in, is that the question with which we started the discussion. We started the discussion with a very basic note that we would be trying to, you can say, try to understand what this term land revenue actually stands for, and how it's going to help us to understand in a more, you can say, illuminating way, in a more, you can say, elaborative way. It's going to help us to understand the impact of it there on the economy, and especially there in the colonial India. Now, with that, it's a quick, you can say, a reply to all that with a question that is going to make us like more comfortable with the theme, and I would be more than happy if we can collectively actually think about is that how and when did the Britishers introduce the land revenue system in India? Now the question seems to be very simple, and somehow we can take the liberty also, because we somehow think that after discussing the basic, you can say, historical background, we are in a position to answer it. So we can say that the implementation of the Devani, you can say the rights, which was the right to collect taxes on behalf of the emperor for Bengal, Bihar and Orissa in 1765. So a major concern of the company was to increase the land revenue collection, which was the major source of revenue for the state in India. So Britishers, you can say, introduced the policy of revenue collection by, you can say dismantling or dismissing the old system of revenue administration, and their major aim was to have the maximum profit from the land. And we all know that obviously the consequences are going to be borne by the cultivators and the peasants, because they were the stakeholders, they were the ones who are going to be primarily hit by. Now, for Britishers then in India, the revenue that was procured, that was taken away from the land and farming, was one of the major sources of their income. And with that, it actually makes us to really think about, you can say, the systems that they have actually come up with. So far what we have actually done is we have tried to understand the circumstances and the conditions within which, you can say, Britishers actually came up with the land revenue systems in order to, you can say, address the changes that in the agrarian, you can say, system. And it has a very deep impact there on the, you can say, the economy as well. Now what we are going to do is we are going to talk about these three, you can say, different, you can say, revenue systems that Britishers have actually come up with. So now we are going to talk about these three major, you can say, land revenue policies with which Britishers actually came in. In that, we are going to talk about, you can say, the permanent settlement or the Jamidari system to begin with. The second, you can say, arrangement that they came up was the Rayatwari system. Okay. And we would be talking about the Mehelwari system. Now, the basic difference in these three systems could be in regard to, you can say, to the mode of payment of land revenue. So now what we are going to do is we are going to discuss these three, you can say, major types of land tenure systems that they have actually come up with. So as we are going to move forward, we are going to discuss these arrangements on a more detailed account, and then in the last we will try to compare these three, you can say, arrangements and what is going to be otherwise, you can say, we are going to as a part of the understanding we are going to gather up when we are going to compare these land revenue systems.